Hi guys, welcome to another video. In Power BI, quite often you will find yourself in a situation where you have a table presented on a report page and that table would span multiple pages. Well, in these kind of scenarios, quite often there is the need to export a table like that to a PDF file or to print all of the entire table, or maybe you want to have it in your audit file, or you want to just print it and take a pen or a marker or a highlighter and just run by all of the items in the table, and so you just want to have it printed on paper. Quite often there's a scenario like that. Here in Power BI, exporting this to a CSV file would be possible, but then I have this in a CSV file and that is not my requirement, right? I just need this in a nice looking, beautifully laid out table on spanning multiple pages. So this solution would not work for that scenario. So what I would do, I already created one, a paginated report that I have embedded here in a Power BI report page. Now give it a sec to load, and you will find that the structure is far better than the one that we just saw before. I have created a paginated report in the Power BI report builder. Now I could have done far more when it comes to laying out the table, make things bold, etc. But you get the idea. I just have a table that looks far better. It spans multiple pages, and the main issue here is that I have this export functionality available. So let me for now just export this to a PDF file, and you will find that it's going to span multiple pages. So I'll get a PDF file consisting out of multiple pages. Here we go. And there we go. So this would be a far better way of making sure that I get the data in my data set in a nicely laid out structure in a PDF file or a printed file or any other kind of way in which I'd be able to export this data. Well, how would you go about creating a paginated report and embedding it on a Power BI report page? Well, that is what I'm going to demo in this video. So stay tuned. So this is the application where we're going to get started, the Power BI Report Builder. It's a separate application from Power BI Desktop, so you'd have to separately download and install it. And this is where you're going to build your paginated reports. So let's get started. What we need to start off by doing, obviously, would be to connect to a data source, right? We do need to bring data in. Yes, I could connect to a Power BI data set that I have already created in Power BI Desktop. But I don't want to do that for this demo. I'm just going to connect to a different data source. And I'm going to connect, it's already here as by default SQL Server. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to write the connection string. I'm just going to build it. So server name, I have it in my clipboard. A database name. So I want to connect to the AdventureWorks dataset. Okay. So this is all fine. So let's go ahead and construct the connection string. Well, we can test it, but it works. And so let's click OK, and that is our data source. So now we have the entire AdventureWorks dataset as a data source. Next, we need a data set in our report builder, and we're going to base a data set off of a data source. So let's go ahead and add a data set. I could also go ahead and say under data, new data set. Okay, and we're going to call this AdventureWorks. And the data source, obviously, data source 1. I should have also probably make sure that this has a better name. So let's call this AdventureWorks database. There we go. AdventureWorks _ database. Okay, so the data set now. So let's add a new data set. And we're going to call this AdventureWorks. And so we base that on the AdventureWorks database. Okay, so now we have to construct a query. So we want to somehow create a query. What I could do is here in SQL write a query, but I'm going to use the query designer here to help me create that query. So here we need to specify the fields out of the tables that we want to use. So let's go ahead and say out of the production table, we want to go to the product table and then have the name of the product and the product ID. And let's continue by also adding information out of the product subcategory. So let's take the subcategory ID, the product category ID, and the name. And let's continue by taking information out of the product category. Here it is. So we take the product category ID and the name, and then a values field. So we need to go into any one of our fact tables. So let's go into our sales table, go into the sales order detail. And here we want to take the product ID, if I can find it. Where are you at? Let's see. This is sales order. This is the header. I should go into the detail, of course, under sales order detail. And here we take the product ID, and let's count the amount of orders that we have received. Okay, so we do want to aggregate this information, right? So here right now, I can also decide. So all of these items have been added here, and now I can say, well, I want to aggregate somehow. So indeed, I want to group everything but the order quantity. That is the field that I want to sum. Here we go. So hitting OK. Yeah, of course. Now it doesn't know how to detect the relationships, right? So I hit auto detect. So here under the relationships pane, I need to set up all of the relationships. So it already detected 2 of them. One from the product subcategory going to the product table, and from the product subcategory going to the product category. So that is already 2 of my my relationships that I need. But there's also a relationship going from the product table to the sales table. Right, this is a snowflake going from the product category to the subcategory to the product table, and then finally on to the fact table. So here let's go and add another one. So we're going to add a relationship coming out of the product table, and that should go to the sales order detail. And here let's add the fields. So left join on the product ID, and right join on the product ID as well, of course. There we go. So now we set up our relationships, okay? So let's hit OK, and here we go. So we get a query, SQL query, as a result out of this query builder. So let's just go to SQL Server Management Studio, paste this entire query, and hit F5 to run it and see what happens. There you go. So this also would just work in SQL Server Management Studio. So this is another way of having queries generated for you. Okay, here in the query builder. So this is the entire query. So now for every product, we know the subcategory it belongs to, the category that the subcategory belongs to, and here we have a value being the sum of the order quantity. Okay, back to the report builder. So let's hit OK. Now we have a data set here. And under that data set, so we can start leveraging this data set. So let's start off by adding a matrix, and then add data to our matrix. So we can start off by just adding the out of the fact table the sum order quantity to the data field. And as you can see here, there's no numbers yet. This is just the layout of the report. If I want to actually see the numbers, then I need to run the report. So I either hit run or exactly the F5. Okay. So now I'm just expecting to see just one value, right? There's no filters applied whatsoever, so I just get the total sum of order quantity. So let's go ahead and get out of the design view, out of the run view and back into the design view, and here say, well, let's go ahead and add some filters to this. So let's start off by slicing this data by product name and see what happens. Yeah, this is what I was expecting, right? So for every product now we get to see the amount of orders for every individual product, and we can slice it even more by product subcategory. Where are you at? Product subcategory ID, product subcategory name, and then the category name. There you go. So let's run this again and see what we have. There you go. Okay, so now we have this filtered in a few different hierarchy layers. Now, going back into my design view, what I also do want to see are the subtotals and the totals for all of my values. So what I would have to do then here is go into the row groups. In this section here, go into the row groups, and for every row that we've got, specify that we want to have a total added. So let's go ahead and do that for all of them. After, last but not least, after. So now let's hit F5 and see what happens. So here we go. So now we receive these totals every single time. All of the subtotals are presented now to us. So this is exactly the way that we wanted to see this table get structured. Okay, so next what we want to do is also add a, let's go ahead and add a header. So the header is up here. This default click to add a title, we're going to add that to the header so it gets represented on, presented on every single page page of the paginated report. So let's call this sales report. And also make sure to add a visual. So we're going to insert an image. Give it a sec. Or not. Oh wait. And we're going to insert an image, but now I do have to make sure that I set up, that I tell it where I want the image to get. Okay, so we want to have use the import functionality in order to import a visual. And let's just take a logo, my own logo, hit OK, and there you go. Okay, so now since this is part of the header part of the header section of this report, it's going to be presented on the top of every page. Let's go ahead and see. I hit F5. Let me go into the print layout. And there you go. So every single page is going to have that same name of the report, and it's going to have that logo. So let's go ahead and make sure that all of these, well, the size is not really the way that I want it for now, right? So let's make this a little bit bigger. Let's make this a little bit bigger, and then we're going to make this smaller, and then we're going to make this a bit smaller, and then let's see what we got. So hit F5 again. And that looks better. Okay, so you can go ahead and do this any way you might want to, right? There's far more that can be done when it comes to laying this out, but for now you get the idea. So next what we want to do is make sure that we also have a parameter. Yes, because that is the issue, right? What I want to be able to do on the Power BI report, I want to be able to slice in that donut chart on any of the product categories, and that should affect this here table. Okay, so the way to do that is by using parameters, and that is something we're going to discuss next. So in order to make sure that this visual, because we're going to embed this as a visual on a Power BI report page, and so what we need to make sure is that the cross filtering is also going to affect this visual. The way to do that is set up parameters. So we're going to have to get started doing that. So let's go into the data set, because that is where we're going to start off setting up a parameter. So we go into the data set properties. I'm going to go back into the query designer, and here under the applied filters I'm going to add a filter. So what we're going to filter on. So I want to actually filter on the not on the product, but on the product category, right? So that is what I want to allow for happening. A filter that gets applied on the product category is passed to this visual here. So in order to do that, we need to set up the product category ID, because that is what we're going to apply the filters on, and I'll set this up as a parameter. Now let's hit OK, and what we'll find now is that there's going to be a where clause added to our SQL code. So this applies a filter, and it's going to apply a filter on a parameter. This add sign, this implies that this is a parameter. Okay, so we can set this up. So under the parameters, what we can find here, so here also is that this query parameter that is part of a data set that we just set up is related to a parameter value. Okay, so here we go. So the parameter gets created. Okay, so this is a report parameter, and now we need to set this up. So let's go ahead and go into the parameter properties. So what we have general, so this is all fine. Well, I don't want to have this be the product category ID. For now it is, right? So this will be a product category ID. So now I would have my users of the report would have to actually add an ID, and I don't want to have them add ID. I want to have them add a name. Okay, so let's set up this as a name. And so that will work now. But the thing is that if I were to run this, so I need to fill out a name, and I need to have just a list of values here that allows for me to pick one, right? So I just want to have a drop down with a list of all my product category names. So I do not have that available yet there's no data structure which holds just product category names. So I need to do so in order to produce that list that would serve as items for my drop down. And so I need to add a second a data set. So we're going to go ahead under data, include a new data set, and this is going to be my product category. Oop, I wasn't done yet. Product category data source, that is going to be the database. So go back into the query designer, and under the production table in the product category table, what we're going to use is both the product category ID, because we need both the code as well as the individual name. So that would serve. So this is a new data set. So I'm just going to hit OK and see that there's a new data set added. So all this includes is, well, let me just go ahead and show. So the dataset properties, if I'm just going to take this code, copy the code, go back here into SQL Server Management Studio, paste the code and run it, and this is what we got. So just this little table holding, which got nothing but the product category IDs and the related names. Okay, so that is a second query that we have added here to our data sets. So now going into the product category ID parameter, now we're going to set this up, parameter properties. So under available values, what we're going to say is get values from a query, right? So the data set here will be the product category that we just created. The values are going to be the product category ID, right? Those are the values, and the labels, which is what we want to allow for our users to pick out of, is this here, the names. Default values, so let's go ahead and say, well, we do want to have one specified. We're not going to actually specify individual values. We're going to have those, get those from a query. Again, product category value field will be the product category ID. And so if here we go, and if I hit OK now, let's run this and see what happens. Here we go. So now so as you can tell, the top one is here in my dropdown. So this is by default the one that is showing. Now the default value is the one up top. Okay, so I can go ahead and select another one, hit view report, and now this is going to get adjusted for, it's actually a filter, right? It's get adjusted for the filter that I'm applying here. So that works. But the thing is though, what we're still missing here is the all product categories in our dropdown. And that is a little harder to do. So what we're going to do is discuss that next. So that item in the dropdown of the product category name being all categories, that is actually what you want to have as a default. But it should definitely be in the list, and it's a very common ask for, you know, having that all items in your dropdown. So what we need to do is have that added to our product category data set. Now the issue is that we don't have a all category in here. If I go ahead back into SQL Server Management Studio, here we go, this does not include a all categories. So we have to come up with a trick. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, let's add a let's create a one record table that holds just that product category ID -1, and then the name should be all product categories, right? So we're going to say select, and let's go ahead and say -1 as product category ID. So now if I'm just going to run this, it's going to be just a one column table. So we need to add a second, and so what we're going to say, to make sure that I do have this in view, I'm just going to run this again. And then the name should be all categories as name. This should result into one. There you go. So what we need to do is make sure that we have the same order as we have here. So first the product category ID, so that looks about right. So we need to union these two. So if I'm going to go ahead and specify the union and run this, there you go. So this is how I would create a table that includes that additional record for all categories. So I'm just going to copy this code, bring it back to the report builder, go into my dataset properties, and paste it here. There we go. So now I do have that included. The thing is though, I do not have a -1 item in my AdventureWorks dataset here. Right? That is not included in my data at all. So if I'm going to run this now, I do have this all categories, but I'm not going to see anything. So we have to come up with a way in which we'd be able to solve that. So we need to go into the dataset, go into the properties of this dataset. Let me make this a bit bigger. Now what we're going to do here, where the where clause, right? We're going to say, well, this is true, right? If a product category ID equals whatever we have set as a parameter, then we want to see that. We want to have it filtered down to that. But if it doesn't happen, then what we're going to do is say, well, then the product category ID, right, then that is -1. So what we're going to say, if -1 is filled out, then we're going to have this equal -1. So let me show you again here what that will do. Paste the entire code, and now all I'm going to do here is that last part. So if -1 is filled out, if the selection by the user in that parameter is set to -1, then this would equal -1. So where -1 equals -1, so this would result into no filter getting applied at all. So if I'm going to run this code, you just get to see everything, right? So no filter is getting applied on the product category. So this is the way I want to. This is the trick that I want to pull off here. So here we go. So I set this up. So now let's see what happens. I run F5 again. There we go. So now it starts off by all categories, and indeed we get 26 pages. But if I filter this down to just one and view the report, there you go. Then all I get to see is just the bikes. Okay. I seem to have one too many. Don't know how this got here. There you go. This looks better. Now we can also make sure that we set this a bit bigger. It's just a little on the small side now, so we have a little extra additional space here. So let's set it up. And also give some more space for this then. That's better. We don't need that much space there. We definitely don't need that much space here. And let's have another look. It doesn't fit well anymore. So we have to go back and make a few adjustments. It's too big now. Okay, so let's make this a bit smaller. There we go. Let's see what we got. It looks about right. Oh. Yeah, this looks about right. This looks like a decent report to me. Okay, so this is what we the way we want to set this up. We still have the margins are still slightly too large. So let's make sure that we decrease the margin size a little bit. The margins here. So the right, well, let's do both. Set this to 0 and to 0. And now let's run this again. And then 15 pages. So this is better. Okay, so going back here. Now we might also want to just include the page numbers here. So we have a footer. This is already set up as a footer. Okay, so what we're going to take out of the built-in fields here is the actual page number we're on. And there you go. So now hitting F5 should also include the page numbers. There you go. It does. And we can also say out of the total number of pages. Okay, just for you to get a feel of the kind of things that you'd be able to include here in a report. So what we need to say is insert a text box. It says off. Get it a little bit closer. There we go. And then we're going to include the total number of pages, overall total pages. Overall total pages, there we go. Doesn't seem to be. There we go. I'm going to make this a lot far smaller as well. And now let's see what we got. Here we go. So this works, right? So this gives a good idea of the kind of formatting you'd be able to do to get this the exact way that you might want to set this up. And one thing that we do definitely want to do is make sure that we repeat the column headers on every page. So let me go ahead and select it, and under the fixed column, repeat the column headers. Let's set that to true. There we go. And hit F5 again. And here we go. So now we can also see that that is happening. Okay, better. So now what we need to do is save this file somehow. So we're going to go ahead and file, save as. And we're going to save this under Paginated Report Builder. Paginated Report Server. Let's do version 2. Save this. Okay, so now after we saved it, we can go ahead and just like a Power BI desktop file, we'd be able to publish this to the service. So I'm publishing this, and I do, which is rather important, I do need to make sure to publish this to a premium workspace. Okay, so it can either be a, let me go ahead and say this is a Paginated Report for AdventureWorks. It can either be a workspace which is dedicated, has been assigned to dedicated capacity, or you'd have a premium per user workspace. Okay, but you do need to make sure that this resides within a premium workspace, or it won't work. Okay, so this is a premium feature of Power BI. All right, so now we have this set up. So then what we want to do is there we go. So go into the Power BI service. Now go into this workspace here that I just showed. Refresh this. There we go. This is the one that we just created. So it is just a an item here, right? So you can just open up the paginated report that we just created just by itself as a standalone report. But what we can also do, and that is what we are going for now, is embed this in a Power BI report. So let me open up Power BI, and then we need to make sure that we get the that we connect to that same data set, right? So that is what we're going to do. So give Power BI a sec to open up. There we go. So now what we need to do is connect to that same SQL Server. So let me just make sure I go back into Management Studio, copy the server name, paste that here, and there we go. We're going to import some data out of this database. Here we go. So it's AdventureWorks, and so we need to take the same tables. So out of the production product table, production.product. There we go. And then the category tables, both of them. And then the sales order detail. Now the thing is that here in the category table, we still let me just make sure that I only bring in the columns that we need. So product ID, I would need the product ID, and I would need the product name. Remove all of the other columns. Product category, Yes, just the product category and the product category name. And product subcategory, so we need the subcategory ID, the product category. I think I removed one too many here in the production product. Yes, because here we also need the product subcategory ID. Remove other columns. Okay. And here under the sales, so all we need here is actually the order quantity and the product ID, and we don't need anything else, not for this demo. But the thing here still, the product category ID does not contain a -1 and all categories. So we do need to add that to this table here. So we're going to go ahead and say, just give me a new query, a blank query, which is just going to be a table. Table. And now I lost my, let me just get rid of this. Or, there we go. Let me just take this and put this on my clipboard for a sec. Here we go. Let's move that aside, make sure that I get the spelling the same way. Didn't really do that. Give that another try. Huh. There we go. This is rather unusual. Okay, so we're going to add a new query. And so what we need to say is give me 2 column headers. So the first one is going to be product category ID, and the second is going to be name, and the values is what I need to specify next. Okay, so we need a -1 and we need a all categories. So let's enter this. So this does result into the table that we were expecting. We select everything and detect data types. Okay, so this is a product category help. Let's make sure we don't load this into Power BI. Okay, so product category, what we're going to do is say under home, append queries, and let's append that helper table. Just to make sure that we include this as well. Sort this to make sure that this is always going to be the first one that appears. And this should be about right. So now here, let's close and apply. So we bring everything into Power BI. So give this a sec to load. And after it did, we have to make sure that the relationships are correct. Okay, so auto detecting of relationship is turned on. So no, it didn't really do what I was expecting. There we go. So we got a subcategory, category, product category ID. And here we got something missing, right? No, we don't. This should be okay. Oh. Product category ID to subcategory ID. Oh, I'm missing the product subcategory ID here in this query. Here we go. There we go. So now we have this snowflake set up all the way. Okay, so indeed we start here at the category, and then that moves down from a one to many, another one to many to the product category, and then a one to many to the sales order detail. Okay, so here now I'd be able to set up anything that we might like to. Let's add a measures table. Here we go. So we want to get a total quantity measure. Quantity equals the sum of that order quantity. Here we go. So now what we want to do is say start off by a, yes, I'm sure I'm going to delete that column. And next what I want to do is hide the sales table. And then out of the product category table, just want to have the names here in a donut, like so. And next what we want to do is well, include the paginated report, right? That's the next thing that we want to do. So we're going to go ahead and do just that. So connect to a report. So this is the one that we just created. So we have to set the parameters. I don't know why this is Dutch, but I don't want to have the standard setup, okay? So I want to be able to select the parameter. I do need to include a parameter though here in the parameters field. Now that I did, I can select it, and as you can tell, the default value of the product category ID equals -1, which means that the default would be show everything, right? So no filters applied. But now here, after this here gets set up, I can just select an item here, apply the changes, and now this is going to get filtered down to just bikes. And last but certainly not least, we'd be able to export this now. So even after applying a filter, we can go ahead and export this to a PDF file. Now here in Power BI Desktop, I would have to include this in a folder, so which is what I'm going to do. If you run this in the service, you would just be downloading it right away. Let me go ahead and open up that file. So this is the PDF that has just been exported out of Power BI, so I can use Power BI Desktop in order to actually get all of the advantages that paginated reports provide. So that's all, folks. Did you like this video? Then like this video, and also make sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.